A federal law enforcement official tells CNN that multiple people have been arrested and accused of discussing a plot to attack Sunday's UFC fight over at the South Lawn of the White House. Those alleged plans included drones and a gunman. Right now, it's unclear how far the plans have developed. Charges are expected to be unsealed today. CNN's Brian Todd is here in the Situation Room. Brian, what more can you tell us about these arrests?
Wolf and Pamela, this is new reporting coming from our colleagues Holmes Lybrand, Kanita Iyer, and Hannah Rabinowitz. This comes from a federal law enforcement official who spoke to CNN. Federal officials have arrested multiple people who they say discussed plots to attack the UFC event at the White House on Sunday, including, as Wolf mentioned, by using drones and a gunman. The official says a law enforcement team, including Secret Service and FBI personnel, uncovered messages discussing the plot between multiple individuals. FBI Director Kash Patel confirmed the arrests in a post on X this morning. Patel saying the alleged plot involved individuals who were outside the National Capital Region, that the FBI and local law enforcement partners became aware of the alleged threat last Wednesday, June 10th, that the alleged attacks were, quote, stopped cold, according to Patel, and that multiple people are in custody. Our source said the group discussed in messages attaching deadly payloads to drones in order to cause panic at the UFC event and to use a gunman to shoot at the crowds. But this is important. It's not clear right now how far this group was in the planning before law enforcement became aware of these messages. Another person familiar with the situation says that charges are expected to be unsealed this morning and that arrests have been made across 4 federal districts. The FBI has so far declined to provide additional details. We do have a statement from Secret Service Director Sean Curran, who said in this statement posted on X, quote, "The U.S. Secret Service worked closely with the FBI throughout the investigation in the days leading up to this weekend. Our special agents, mission support personnel, and technical security teams worked around the clock to identify those responsible and hold them accountable," end quote. Also, Vice President J.D. Vance spoke about this alleged plot this morning on Fox. Take a listen.
This is very, very dark stuff. And unfortunately, we're talking about this a little bit off camera, but this is what happens when people turn the rhetoric up so loud that disagreeing with somebody is a cause for violence. That's the place that we've come to, unfortunately, with too much of our political rhetoric. We got to tell everybody to tone it down. And I hate to say this, but it's true. You see more political violence and violent rhetoric coming from the left than the right these days. Everybody has a role to cut this stuff out.
And that assertion that there's more political violence and violent rhetoric coming from the left than the right is at least in some dispute. Fox News reported on the planned attacks. They first reported on the planned attacks. Now, about 100,000 people gathered around the Ellipse for that UFC event on Sunday for this huge viewing party, guys. And as you know, there were about 4,000 people inside the event itself, with about 100,000 people out on the Ellipse. We were out there covering this. Our colleagues Sarah Seidner and Donnie O'Sullivan were inside that perimeter during the event. I was outside covering the security. A massive crowd was there. You hate to think of what could have happened had this alleged plot unfolded. It's important to know we don't know how far they were in actually apparently carrying out this plot, or whether it was just being discussed. It's also important to remember that they discovered at least this. They became aware of this Wednesday, June 10th. That was 3 days before this event, actually 3 days before just the Fan Fest event on Saturday, 4 days before the event on Sunday.
And we'll be learning more as they unseal documents in the course of today, right?
Correct. Yes, there'll be more information coming from unsealed documents. Apparently, there were several people involved in this, according to Kash Patel, people from outside the National Capital Region.
Let's bring in CNN senior law enforcement analyst, the former FBI Deputy Director, Andrew McCabe. Andrew, what do you expect that we will all learn once these charges are unsealed today?
Yeah, well, we'll learn a lot, hopefully, when the charges get unsealed. Typically, we get the affidavits that were filed and presented to the judge, and then filed, of course, in pursuit of the arrest warrants. And it's in those affidavits that the FBI agents and other law enforcement agents lay out exactly the facts that led them to the probable cause determination that led to these arrests. So what we'll be looking for are things like what these folks actually had, as opposed to what they talked about. So in every one of these plots, well, if I can tell you that the FBI looks at a potential plotter in terms of 2 factors, intent and capability. once you have access to things like the signal chats we've heard about, you know that their intent was very clear here. The question that remains is whether they had the capability to carry out an attack along the lines of the one that they allegedly discussed.
The official we spoke to said the U.S. Secret Service and the FBI uncovered messages between multiple people discussing these plans. Explain how these conversations can land on law enforcement's radar.
Sure. So there are many ways that these sorts of discussions can come to law enforcement's attention. In this case, according to reporting, one of the prime suspects was the subject of a report from his parents to local police. They were concerned about his weapons purchases and the fact that he'd been in contact with many people online. And I think it was that initial tip that likely led to some of this investigation. That tip came in on June 10th. So, again, those sorts of communications are very valuable to investigators because they show you the intent of the people involved, and they also identify more people that may have been involved in this conspiracy. And that seems to be how we get to the number of 20 or 23 people that the government says they have connected to this plot.
And it's interesting, Andrew, because we're told there were arrests across 4 federal districts. What type of coordination is needed in a case like this across multiple states, for example, to track and eventually thwart a potential attack?
It's a complicated and high-risk operation. You want to collect as much evidence as you can, so you have to let the plot develop to a certain extent, but you cannot let it get out of control. You can't let this happen. In this case, where you had agents and agencies in multiple states working, that coordination is challenging, but I will say they're very, very good at it because we've literally been doing this across decades now in the post 9/11 period, particularly with the help of the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Forces, which are all over the country. So that kind of coordination, although it requires a lot of effort, law enforcement is particularly good at it. It also requires coordination among these offenders. So you have people allegedly participating in this plot across different states. The question is, were they really plotting? Was this something that was going to happen, or was this kind of the the ideation, the kind of puffing of people who say crazy things online? But we'll learn more about that when the charges get unsealed.
Mr. President, were you briefed on the attack plans for the UFC event at the White House? There was the FBI thwarted an attack.
I haven't heard about it, no. But I watched, the attack that I watched were the fighters. And he saw it too, by the way. He was sitting back home in his beautiful palace and he was watching it. And they were as good a fights as I've ever seen, right?
The best fight.
The best. They were. That last fight was brutal. Wow. And the two last, all of the fights were
The
good.
two fights.
It was all good. It was a great evening. It was very different for the White House, but I wish you could have been there. We built an incredible arena. Dana did a great job.
Is there going to be another fight next year, Mr. President?
Well, I don't know. I got away with it because 250 years. Maybe in another 50, maybe in 300.